Breaking news today, Miami Dolphins fans, as on Wednesday we learned that our Miami Dolphins and defensive coordinator Vic Fangio have agreed to part ways. That report that came out on Wednesday states that Vic Fangio is actually already considered to be a top candidate for the vacant defensive coordinator position in Philadelphia. Now, if you remember, back in 2022, the Philadelphia Eagles brought Fangio on as a consultant. He obviously did that job, joined us for 2023, but that's where it ends. A brief one-year stint for Vic Fangio as this team's defensive coordinator. The report also did say that Miami's at least kind of partially also letting him go, in part so that Vic Fangio can be closer to his family. But like I said, the stint as defensive coordinator was short-lived, one season. He did guide the Dolphins to have the 10th ranked defense in the NFL in 2023. But now the search for a new defensive coordinator for the second time in as many years begins. So we're going to get to some potential names to monitor as well. Before I get to those names, though, I do want to provide a little bit of insight and information that I did receive earlier this afternoon. And actually, before I get to that, I want to hear from you as well. Your thoughts on this mutually agreeing of parting ways. Drop those in the comments. And then who would you like to see brought in to be this team's defensive coordinator in 2024? Drop all that stuff in the comments. As I was getting to earlier today, I was told that Vic Fangio, Mike McDaniel, they had some issues with each other. And also some of the players on the defensive side of the ball had some issues with Vic Fangio and how he kind of went about things. Now, it's kind of funny because if you go back to when this hiring happened, I actually kind of liked it because you had Mike McDaniel, who's the players coach, kind of brings the team together in the locker room, a little bit free-spirited. You have that. And then at the end of the day, you still had Vic Fangio, who could be the experienced guy, the disciplined guy, kind of like the grandfather guy, overseeing everything. However, it didn't sound like those two kind of personalities, beliefs really gelled all that well with each other. Mike McDaniel, I'm being told, was not super happy with how Vic Fangio didn't necessarily react and adapt to the personnel changes that we had to go through defensively because of all the injuries we come up. The one that probably comes to mind the best is once Xavier Howard went out, why are we not using Jalen Ramsey to his fullest potential with shadowing? Sounds like some of that kind of stuff maybe weighed on Mike McDaniel a little bit. And from the other side, seems like Vic Fangio wasn't a huge fan of Mike McDaniel's his style and necessarily his idea of discipline and being more hard on the players. Vic Fangio is a little bit more old school. Mike McDaniel is a little bit more new school in that. That didn't sit all that well with Vic Fangio as well. And the last piece of news that I had is that Vic Fangio also thought Mike McDaniel's play calling, sort of in some of the bigger games, some of his play calling would put some unnecessary stress on the defense as well. So there was definitely some disagreements, not necessarily the best match made in heaven that we thought this could be back last offseason when it happened. So it sounds like things did get a little bit ugly in this particular situation. However, like the report that you're likely going to see from Schefter and all those other guys, they're likely going to focus on the agreement being mutual, going separate ways, letting Fangio being closer to his family. But I talked about some potential candidates. What we're going to go into today is definitely not an encompassing list. It's rather some names that are kind of in my mind being tossed around. So let's start with the name that's currently not in house, and that is Brandon Staley. He was most recently the head coach of the LA Chargers. He was fired after 14 games for the Chargers this season. Prior to becoming the Chargers head coach, he was the defensive coordinator with the Rams in 2020, and he was the outside linebackers coach with the Broncos in 19, with the Bears in 17 and 18. So he's got good experience in the NFL, not necessarily a ton of success as a head coach. He was 24 and 24 there with the Chargers. But with the Rams, he was the defensive coordinator of the team that finished first in points allowed that year and first in total yards allowed per game that year as well. So that's really what kind of put him on the map, put him in the position to be considered a head coach candidate. So keep an eye on him. Anthony Campanile, he has been the Miami Dolphins linebacker coach since 2020. His name was also starting to get a little bit of steam, kind of pick up a little bit of heat there and being floated around with some other teams that are looking to fill their defensive coordinator jobs. So he's definitely an in-house candidate to replace a guy like Vic Fangio. Prior to joining the Miami Dolphins, he was the linebacker coach at Michigan. And before that, he spent time at both Boston College and Rutgers, coaching a few different positional groups. And if you got to watch Hard Knocks this season, you know Campanile was kind of the rah-rah, he's going to get at you kind of defensive coordinator. So maybe he can slide into that father figure more so than what Mike McDaniel is able to do. One last guy that we're gonna hit on in today's video is Renaldo Hill. Obviously, another in-house candidate. He joined the Miami Dolphins coaching staff in 2023 as the defensive backs coach after spending both 21 and 22 with the Chargers as their defensive coordinator. So it was a little bit of an interesting move last season when he went from being a defensive coordinator to almost seeming like it was more of like I don't want to say a demotion because it wasn't in-house, but then moving on to being a defensive back coach. But I think part of that was him seeing an opportunity to potentially become this team's defensive coordinator, at least maybe at some point. And as we know now with the Fangio news, that point could be as soon as this upcoming season. But before being the Chargers defensive coordinator, he was the defensive back coach in both 19 and 20 with the Denver Broncos, and he was an assistant defensive back coach with our Miami Dolphins in 2018. And as a lot of you probably know, he actually played with the Miami Dolphins in 06 to 08. So there's at least a few guys to keep an eye on now after hearing today's news. But like I said, I want to hear your thoughts. Give me your thoughts on the Dolphins and Fangio agreeing to part ways. And then who do you got? It might not have to be one of those three guys. Like I said, that's not an encompassing list by any means, but drop your candidates to keep an eye on in the comments. As always, get subscribed if you haven't done so already. We'll be pumping out videos. I was actually just prepping a Christian Wilkins video right before this happened, so we'll get to that. But on top of that, anything that's going on with the defensive coordinator position, we will have for you on the Fins Up Network. That is what I got for today, Dolphins fans. Until next time, Fins Up.